Hello and welcome to the Walk by Faith podcast, presented to you by myself, Joshua Millwood.
And me, Whitney Millwood.
We are so glad to be able to be here with you and share some encouraging words and other things through this brand new podcast series called Walk by Faith. But first, before we begin to get into anything today, which we are going to discuss our testimonies, a good, perfect way to start our journey here in the podcast world is to tell you a little bit about us. But before we do that, we would like for you to give a listen to our official introduction.
Love came down for a broken world. He gave it all so we could live. In the dark, hope took a breath. Mercy spoke, this is the gift. No fear left, no chains remain. His love says we are not condemned. We walk by faith, not by sight, held by grace both day and night. Nothing can stand, nothing can part the love of Christ that guards our hearts. We walk by faith.
All right. Well, there you have it. We walk by faith, of course, always. But with that, we thought that it would be the best thing for us starting out this interesting podcast, this family-friendly podcast, would be to properly introduce ourselves. So moving forward into the podcast here on the channel, you guys could understand a little bit about me and a little bit about Whitney as well. So you guys kind of knew what we came from and where we found Christ, most importantly. For me, which I suppose I'll go ahead and start everything off with my testimony. I am currently 30 years of age, and I don't remember exactly what age I was when I found Jesus, but I do know that throughout my entire childhood, when I was really, really young, I got into magic and ventriloquism and puppets and all kinds of stuff, and I had my grandma and my mom and my papa, and a lot of my family members were Christian. They wouldn't really go to church every single day, and they wouldn't read their Bible every day either. But they would, there was several mentions of who Jesus is, and there was proper foundation laid, I guess is what you would say, where they told me what I needed to hear to kind of put me in the right headspace of knowing who Jesus was. And eventually it got to the point where, we went to church off and on. We would go to like special services and stuff, where we'd do the wine or the grape juice or whatever, and the crackers and stuff. And we would do the Christmas celebrations, Easter celebrations, and all that kind of stuff. And when I got into high school and I would do the magic and stuff, magic and ventriloquism and puppets was kind of all I had, because not being extremely strong in my faith, all I had was my puppets, mainly the pirate puppet that I have in my shows. And I would talk to him and I would joke with him and stuff, and I didn't really have a lot of friends. I didn't pray. I didn't have a strong relationship with the Lord. But then when I got to high school, um, I had a high school sweetheart at the time that had she wanted me to come to church with her, and I went to church, and she fell off from church, and she went and started doing her other own stuff. But I kept to it. I stayed in that church. It was off of number 9. I don't remember the name of it, but it's local. And there was one day that there was a church right up the road from them that had a judgment house. And I went up there to the judgment house with them and walked through. They had a very compelling story. It was very heartfelt. They took us through hell. They took us through heaven, and kind of give the prompt of, where will you go? Do you know if you're going to go to heaven? Do you know if you're going to go to hell? And at the end of everything, they had like a little section where you could pray, and they had slips of paper that you could write things down. And one of the questions, like I said, was, are you going to go to heaven or are you going to go to hell? And at that time, I put down on the paper that I didn't know. I didn't know where I was going. I knew who Jesus was. I had grown up hearing about him and knowing of some of the things that he did, bringing people back from the dead and healing sickness and all these things, and that he rose from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion, and that he died for us. I had heard all those things, the typical things that most people know, even kids know most of the time. But I didn't know any more than that. I didn't have a personal relationship with him or anything. And so when it came down to it, that night at the judgment house, I really didn't know. I had no clue what was going to happen, where it was going to go from there. And so I prayed. I had one of the pastors there pray with me, and they prayed with me, and I accepted him into my life and into my heart. And it changed everything. I felt different, but I still did all the typical things that I would do. I still wasn't going to church. I still wasn't reading my Bible. I had picked my Bible up from time to time to try and read it. But being autistic and learning different and having a learning disability and stuff as well, I wasn't able to grasp reading the Bible like everybody can. And so I never sat down and I never read it. So I just kind of heard here and there, like everywhere I'd go, people I would talk to and stuff, they would tell me their testimonies. They would tell me all kinds of different stories from the Bible. I would have people quoting Bible verses and stuff, and I would be kind of jealous. I was in those moments where, like me and you several times, that we've talked about how, we wish that we could just sit down and quote like your dad quotes Bible verses. We're always like, I wish I could get to that point where, if somebody comes to me for advice and they're like, I'm going through something, instead of just sitting there and tapping them on the shoulder and saying, it's okay, you're fine, we could actually refer to a Bible verse and tell them Matthew 8 or whatever, and tell them,
this applies to you right now.
Yeah, and basically tell them, hey, here's you a verse. I've always wanted to get there. I've had people before in my past were like that. And like I said, I never read the Bible. I didn't put in any efforts or anything. I just surrendered my life to him and just kept going. And recently, within like the last year or so, I kind of came back around full circle. I stopped doing the magic and stuff for about 4 or 5 years, and kind of started putting more focus to myself, to growing and looking out for myself, my health, and everything else. And one of the main things was getting back in church. So I moved in with my dad, and my dad had a very bad incident where he almost died. He was bad on drugs and stuff throughout my life. He really wasn't there a lot. There was a lot of family drama, a lot of not being able to have my father in my life, and just kind of a rough childhood all around growing up, kind of bouncing from one home to another, going from one school to another, and I didn't really have a good relationship with my dad. And recently, I've, like within the last 1.5 to 2 years, our relationship has been amazing. And this is speaking from 2016, like where we are right now. Me and him and our relationship has grown a lot since then, and we've really connected. And I moved in with him right after the last previous relationship, and lo and behold, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Because after I moved in with him, my dad had just had a life-changing experience that completely stopped him in his tracks, and the Lord was practically calling him. And he dropped all the drugs, he dropped the smoking, he dropped everything. And he started going to church. And I moved in with him, and he invited me to go along with him. And I did. I started going to church, what?
I ain't gonna lie. I thought I blanked out for a second, so I didn't realize you were talking about you and your dad on Earth when you said y'all's relationship been good for 2 years. And when you said I moved in with him, I was like, how you get to move in with Jesus? I was sitting there in my head like, I want to move in with Jesus. What?
No. I wish I could. I'd love
Y'all,
to.
I blank out a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd love to give Jesus a big old hug. Like I tell Whitney all the time, I am such a jokester. I would love more than anything to stand before Jesus himself. And I know on a daily basis I say and do a lot of things that tickles him, and he laughs and kind of chuckles and stuff because who am I kidding? I'm a squirrel. I squirrel out just as much as she does. But I would love to be able to just see the facial expressions on Jesus's face and be able to hug him tight and just tell him. I mean, I could tell him now how enjoyable it is to make him laugh, but I'd love to be able to just stand before him. So I'm here to tell you guys, I am excited and ready for my time to come. I cannot wait to see to meet my Maker and to see him face to face and to give him a hug and stuff. I love it because through my testimony, like I was saying, I knew of him, and I didn't really have a relationship with him until it came to my dad and moving in with him and him kind of getting me into church. And I had been in church throughout my entire life, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't that consistent. And so finally moving in with him, it pushed me to get back into church. And then I had a friend, our friend Amber, she invited us, and this was before I met Whitney, invited me to go to her church, Lake Bowen Baptist Church, with Pastor Brad, and amazing pastor. And I went, and I started going and visiting a good couple of Sundays. And eventually it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm ready to once again rededicate my life. From all those years ago when I went to the Judgment House, I wanted to rededicate my life again and kind of get myself on track. And from there, I was like, what's the next step? I had heard many a times from many different people throughout my entire life, oh, in order to get to heaven, you have to be saved and baptized. And then you hear from some people, you don't have to be baptized. All you got to be is saved. You got to accept him into your heart. And at this point, I think I've kind of come to that conclusion that when he died on the cross for us, he died for us. That was him buying us. That was him redeeming us and saying, it doesn't take any more than following me and accepting me as your Savior, the man who did this for you, who saved your life, who did this for you, and you can get to heaven. That's all it takes. Baptism is nothing but an outward expression of the inward decision that you have made to follow him and put him first and have him as your foundation. And of course, this is something that I had been confused on all my life, but going to that church, to Lake Bowen, I finally got to the point where I wasn't, all this time I had been kind of scared, I guess you could say, of professing my faith because of the way the world was. And just like Pastor Brad said in my baptism, I was following the world. I was so terrified and so scared of the way that the world was that I didn't want to say anything or do anything because I knew that certain topics would draw certain people away. And at the end of the day, what I needed to realize is the topics that drive those people away, those people wasn't meant to be there in the first place. But if I'm speaking Jesus and those people leave, the right people is going to eventually walk up and they're going to listen.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't see. I didn't see that at that time. But as I've gone on and I've continued and I've got to where my faith is now, I realize that when you speak of Jesus and you do all the things that you're supposed to do, you're going to have tons of people that don't want nothing to do with you. They just turn you off. They don't listen to you. They walk away. They leave, all these kind of things. But the Lord will bring the right people in to replace those people who have left.
It's only our job to plant the seed.
Exactly. And so throughout my testimony of kind of knowing him a little bit and trying to follow the world, and then finally getting to the point of saying, you know what, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of hiding it. I want to show it proudly. I want to boastfully tell people about Jesus and say, hey, there's a greater purpose. There's a greater thing that you're not seeing, that you're just walking around every day and you don't give thanks to the person who gave you breath. You don't give thanks to the Creator, the person who allowed you to even be here, the person who allowed you to always be forgiven, someone who sent his only son for you, and that son died, and all the things that he's done for you. Now I'm very, very proud and very excited to always tell people about Jesus. And that's where I've gotten now in my continuously written testimony, that in my shows, my magic shows and stuff, I never did this in the past. Now I proudly tell people in my shows, I am an autistic kid who came from nothing and felt so alone and like an outcast, and I never was. And now where I'm at, I know Jesus more than I've ever known him before. I walk beside him every day, and he's become not just somebody to talk to when I'm weak, but he's become a best friend. He's my father. He's my friend. He's my everything. He's the beginning, the end, the Alpha, the Omega. He's everything. And I believe that this journey has been very long for me in my testimony. And the people who I've talked to recently, I've always talked almost like my testimony's done and over with, but it's not. I know you, kind of transitioning over to you at this point, I know you have the song that you put on our stuff is titled Still Being Written. And that's because you look at it as your testimony still being written, which mine is too. But at the end of the day, you still have a pretty hefty testimony that you come from. A past life that you've also experienced, kind of similar to mine, that has kind of brought you to where you are now. So I think I'm going to give you the floor at this point and allow you to tell us a little bit about your testimony.
So this is my testimony, or a little bit of my testimony, which is also still being written, like Josh said his was.
Yep.
So basically, growing up, I had a pretty decent childhood. I'd say I had a very good childhood, actually. We grew up in Piedmont, South Carolina. That's where I'm from. I was
far away from here.
Yeah, it was pretty good distance from Spartanburg. I was born in Greenville at Greenville Memorial, which I'm sure a lot of you were, being from anywhere around Greenville, South Carolina. But anyway, so I grew up in Piedmont, lived in a little house on Rockville Drive with my dad and mom and my brother, Jostin. My dad's name is Whit, my mom's name is Misty, and I'm Whitney. Me and my brother have a 4-year age difference, so he was a little older than me whenever my parents divorced. Everything started off really good. We had a good little family life. We was raised in church, went to church every Sunday. My mom, she worked in the office, like data entry lifestyle. My dad, he had different odd-end jobs, and he was very dedicated to his music. He was in a Christian rock band, still is in a Christian rock band. He's been in quite a few different rock bands, or Christian bands, excuse me. And he, our household, we had, like I said, a lot of good family moments together. We had a lot of good nights where we would watch movies and TV together, and we would enjoy family time together, and we had a lot of love in that home. But unfortunately, the enemy was working in my parents' life, and I was really young. I was a daddy's girl, and I was too young to really know what was going on. I did see minor arguments here and there, and My brother, he kind of just stayed in his room a lot, played video games, any typical teenager, what they would do.
Speak from experience, yeah.
And
that was me too.
yeah, and so, but I love the neighborhood that we had. Rockville was such a special place to me. I went to a little school called Grove Elementary, and that was nice, and I had a lot of good times at Grove, a lot of bad times. I had, you have your typical bullies, so I was picked on. I was an overweight kid. I had I've always had big curly hair. I was picked on for my hair by this specific bully. She always wanted me to straighten my hair. And other than that bus experience, I had a pretty good school life. I had a good, home life. I'd come home. Dad would always be at home before me and Justin would get home and from school, and we would just I'd go to my room and play, and Jot would do his thing, and Dad would do his thing, outside work, doing the man's work, and then Mom would get home, she'd cook dinner, and it was really nice. But like I said, the enemy was working in my parents' relationship. Some things happened between my father and mother, and unfortunately that led to a divorce. I remember, I'll never forget the night they pulled us into my brother's room, and we were sitting on my brother's bed, and they told us that Dad was leaving that night. That very night he was going to be packing and leaving, and that they could not do it anymore. She was unhappy, and I don't really remember the conversation fully, but I think I was like around 8 or 10, I don't remember. I was young, and Justin was around, anywhere from 12 to 14, and it was really sad. It was a heartbreaking moment. Justin was kind of, I don't know where he was, but me, I was, of course, crying at the top of my lungs. I was begging my dad not to leave, hanging on to his leg pretty much. That was one of the hardest nights of my life. And so from that point, my dad moved in with his sister. Technically his sisters. He has 2 sisters. One's older, one's younger. No, one's the middle. He's the youngest, sorry. And so he would kind of hop back and forth between the sister's house for a while, for like so many years. We would go over his house every other weekend, or their house, and we would kind of just stay with him and hang out with him for the weekend. And me and Mom and Justin moved into my grandpa's old house in in Pelham, South Carolina. It was a very nice home. We loved Papa dearly, and Papa, my grandma, I never got to really get close to her, because I was a baby when she passed away. So my brother got to get close to her, but I didn't, and I always kind of wanted that relationship. So that's one person, when I get to heaven specifically, that I can't wait to meet and see, because I know that there's things that I've done in my lifetime that my mom has been like, oh, my mama used to do that, my mama used to think that way or say that. And so I see that there's common things that I do that my grandma does. So it's cool, because I have things in common with someone that I don't really know, but can't wait to meet. We moved into my papa's house. My papa stayed with us for a little bit, and that was nice. And my papa, he was the best man. He's always been the best man in our family's life. He's the family man. He's the guy that everybody in our family looks up to and loves to death. He's a hoot. He's a jack of all trades, and he's just one of those crazy outbursting people who will just say crazy stuff off the top of his head. He used to wake us up in the morning. He'd always cook breakfast, get up early, and he would just be like, rise and shine, and he'd walk through the house banging pots and pans together, make you want to go out and choke him to death. But we would get up to
sounds kind of like my dad.
Yeah, but
the little bits that he was in our life or whatever, he would do the same thing. Or you'd wake up, instead of hearing the pots and pans, he'd be singing to the top of his lungs, just random Christian songs or rock songs, of course, because that's what he grew up with. But yeah, I know where you're coming from with that.
Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, I miss my papa. Every time I talk about him, it's hard. But anyway, so we would wake up to really good smelling food, because my papa, one thing he could do was cook. That man could cook his butt off, and so I always made the best breakfast. I'll never forget the smell of his breakfast. And his mason jars, he loved drinking tea out of mason jars, and so we would go and sit at the table, and we would eat, and he was hilarious because I guess I'm just somebody who pops their lips when I eat. I smack my lips, and he would always pause in the middle of the food and look over at me and be like, quit smacking them lips. And so, but yeah, and he'd tap your head, he'd put his hand on your head and tap his other hand on it and be like, be somebody. He'd always say just the most off-the-wall things. He was just the best person you'd ever known. Unfortunately, it was, I believe, March or April of 2024. He went to be with Jesus. He had passed away from colon cancer. He had got sick but he lived a long life. I think he was like almost 90, 80 something, high 80s, and he he's a strong person. He was just that hard-working man that you didn't think would ever pass away. You thought he'd be somebody who lived till he was late in his hundreds, because he was just someone who knew how to work and knew how to stay busy and keep healthy. And but he went on to be with the Lord. Unfortunately, cancer got him. That was a heart-wrenching thing to go through. That was a really tough battle. My mom was his caretaker for a couple years. He had moved in with us. Anyway, she took care of him for a while, and that was pretty rough. And so back to where I was, we were living with my papa, in his house, and then he remarried, and he moved out into a house with his new wife. And my dad, he had his struggles. Like I said, we'd go visit him, and then we were with Mom and Justin. Mom and Justin kind of just did the best we could together. Mom was a single mom. She took care of me and Justin and the best she could, and she worked her butt off. I mean, she took really good care of us, and we had our struggles in different areas and financial and all that, but God was always there. He kept us, our heads above water, kept us afloat, always provided what we needed. And so we made it through, and then eventually that came to an end. We moved out of that house, and we moved into a little, I think we lived in an apartment first, and then we lived in a mobile home in Easley. And we were still going to see Dad on the weekends. He actually found someone from his past and remarried. I call her Mama too now. Her name's Michelle. She's a blessing in our family. And so he moved in with Michelle. They had a little mobile home in Easley as well. And not too far from us, where we lived with Mom, in another mobile home community. And we went to Woodland at that point, Woodland Middle, Woodland High. And I left a lot out. I mean, there's other schools. We kind of hopped around throughout the time of moving with Mom and Dad, and different schools we went to, but that doesn't matter. And so, where we are now, my dad, him and Michelle took off. They had a baby, which was our half-sister, Paxton, and then she had 2 kids already prior, and so to Dad, and so they were stepsisters, Kayla and Zachary, So, me and Jock would go over there, that we had a lot of good family moments with them there, in that little place that we lived in with them, and, eventually Justin got older, and he moved on. He found someone from Tennessee, and she came down and stayed with us for a little bit, and then eventually he moved up to Tennessee with her and her family, and my brother. And then, so it was just me and Mom from there. And me and Mom, we just kind of stayed together ever since. We moved out from that mobile home and moved into a little townhome in Greer, where my Nana lived. It was my Nana's townhome that she had kind of passed down to us. Eventually they ended up selling that townhome, but while we were there, from the mobile home to the townhome, me and Mom had our struggles. We struggled with not having Justin anymore, because he was our third, he was our little person in our triangle. We used to just spend time together. We had a lot of good times in that mobile home. We, watched a lot of movies together, had a lot of family time. We just a lot of love. And so, but like I said, he met his soulmate and moved out, and then it was just me and Mom, and we had our ups and downs and finances and all that, and we did the best we could. Mom, she went through a lot of tough relationships. I watched my mom struggle a lot in her life with just ins and outs of men that weren't so good for her. She would pray and pray for a good man to come, and unfortunately she kind of just went through a handful of bad men, and I had to sit there and watch that, and then it kind of put a wedge in our relationship a little bit, so I would kind of move in my brother's house, and or wherever he was at the time, apartment, wherever, and I'd kind of hop back and forth between him and Mom's house, and stayed with him and my sister-in-law, Courtney, and my nephew, Rylan, and would just help them take care of Rylan when Rylan was younger, and just hang out with them, and, and my dad, he always did the best he could. He had his little family thing going on with Michelle and her kids, and our half-sister Paxton, and it was, I still went over and saw Dad. I still had my time with them, but eventually, you get older and you kind of don't see each other as much, and we all grew up and had our own families. All the siblings branched off and had their own families, and then we just kind of got to where we were just seeing each other on holidays, really, and I'm hoping to make some changes here soon to where I can see my dad and his family a lot more. We're hoping to move down near him, and get into ministry work and evangelism, me and Josh, and so far, just, as I was stating, eventually it got to where I moved back with my mom, and it was just me and her from there. And
let me cut you off for a second. I know we're getting close to kind of the big life-changing moment of your life, but throughout all of this stuff, where was your faith? Like, I mean, were you guys in church and out of church, kind of like me, or were you consistently in church, or were you not in church at all, or
yeah,
how was the church life and the walk with faith and with Jesus and stuff throughout these moments?
So
the shifting houses and the family and stuff.
Yeah, so I would say right after the divorce, when we moved into Papa's house, I remember with Mom, she was still trying to stay in church, so we would go to Papa's church in Pelzer with Pelham, with I think it was called New Beginnings Gospel. We would go there, or Pelham First Baptist, excuse me, is where we went, and we would go there with Mom every once in a while, and eventually it stopped. Mom didn't go to church as much. She kind of, fell out, and she was still a Christian. She used to be really on fire for God. Like, her and Dad, when they were together, they went to church religiously.
Yeah.
And, like I said, Dad was in a band. He had band practice. We would go to his band practices. We would go to church, all that. But then, like I said, when the divorce happened, Mom kind of strayed away a bit. But Dad, he pretty much every time we went over Dad's house on the weekends that were his, that man, you wouldn't stay out of church. If you was sick, he would like, all the more reason to get up and go to church. So we would, we stayed in church with Daddy, yeah. And so, yeah. So I mean, and with Dad, it was a roller coaster, because we would hop from church to church to church, because he just it was like picking through candy. Like, he wanted to find what was best for him, for us. He was filling out all the churches. He just kind of just liked to go and visit different churches, and we would find a home in a church for a while, and then we would go to something different. But we landed at a church eventually that my stepmother's mother would play piano at. And I can't remember what it was called, but we stayed there for a little while, and then, after that, whenever we grew up and pulled away and didn't go to Dad's as much, obviously I didn't go to church with Dad anymore. And then, but my relationship with God, I knew Christ. I think I was 16, either 14 or 16, I don't remember, but there was a church. We were going to obviously the judgment houses during Halloween, or wherever they throw them little judgment houses at the churches.
Oh, yeah.
Where you go through the scenery stuff and all that. Well, we went to a big play one. I had went to a judgment house when I was really little with Mom and Dad, and that was fun because it was a walkthrough. You went to different rooms, and there was different scenes played
exactly how the one that I went through was, yeah.
Right, it was really fun.
It literally,
Scary.
It's kind of like a takeover of the entire church. The entire church becomes the story.
Yes.
And it's like from one room to the next,
yes.
They kind of paint the pictures of different scenes.
Different life scene situations.
They have like a complete story put together, like a play.
Yeah.
and then and then it goes from there, and you
Yep.
go from one room to the next.
Yep.
And typically, there's one character that
Yeah.
is portrayed to go to hell, and there's
one
one
through
character to go to heaven,
Yeah.
and you kind of get to see the flip of both.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw. They took us into a room where this couple was arguing about something, and you know, they were throwing laundry baskets around. They were mad, and then they took us into a room where there was a car accident, and it was really cool because this one room, you wouldn't have thought there was a wall. They made it look like you were outside, like in a street,
Yeah.
and there was a fire truck, and there was a person laying on the ground. There was smoke, and it was a son and a father, and the father was kneeling down like, "No, don't take my boy," la 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 la. And so, and then we moved into hell, and then we moved, which was very scary. And then we moved into heaven, and we were all like standing outside of this rope thing. There was a rope in the center, and there was a line for people who were going to hell and a line for people going to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a judgment man, and he was calling out names of all of us, and I was so scared as a kid because I was like, if he puts me in the hell line, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was so scared because I didn't want to. And so,
As you should have been. I mean, yeah. But yeah, oh, trust me, I speak from experience with that too. And it sounds kind of like we had the same story, because I kind of think I remember like an arguing couple and then a car accident and stuff too. So,
just
but
different
yeah,
scenes.
I definitely can speak from experience. If any of our viewers have ever been to a judgment house, I'm sure they could also vouch
Relate.
that they're very, very fun and very interesting. But when you kind of get to the more darker portion of it, and it's really
It
scary.
can be, yeah.
But for some people, that's that push.
It's a good fear.
It's the push that
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
to kind of know, hey, this
Yeah.
may be your eternal
Yeah.
damnation of going to
Yeah.
hell, and you need to kind of get your act together.
Fear is your friend in that way, in that area, and like it's a God fearing fear, and it's that's like the best fear you can have is a God fearing fear.
Yeah.
To know that, hey, you know, he's your basically the author, and he's the one who says your salvation and like points you to what's going to happen. He's the deal, you know. He has the final say. And so, but yeah, no, so that was the first Judgment House experience. The second one, like I said, I think I was 16. We went to this huge church in Easley, and I cannot remember what it was called, but it was just, they had a huge stage, huge auditorium, and we went, and there was a bunch of people there that night, and I'll never forget, I wore the most goofiest outfit. I was somebody who just didn't really have a lot of like a nice wardrobe, and I wore like these jeans and these wacky looking boots and this big old jacket, but I didn't even care. I would just, you know, I was excited. And so we went there, and we were watching this, they were doing a Judgment House play, but on stage, and they would like dim the lights down before they put up a new scene, and then they would play it out, and just, it was so moving. By the time they got to the end of it, asking if anybody wanted to come down, you know, it was such a beautiful play.
Yeah.
And when they got to the heaven part, it shook me really to my core. The people arriving into heaven and just everything, and just the story displayed out how it was displayed. And so anyway, when he asked people if anybody wanted to come down, I just remember, you know, all the people I was there, which was my stepmom, my dad, Kayla, Zachary, Justin, my siblings, like, they all was looking over at me. They could tell I was moved because I was crying and shaking a bit, and I got up, and I think Dad, he got up and he helped me go down the stairs, and a lot of stairs, oh my goodness, to get to the stage. And me and Justin, we both went, and all of us went, but we went down there to give our lives and dedicate our lives to God. So I remember that. I think that was the first time I asked Jesus into my heart. And I mean, you know, growing up in my teen years, my young 20s, I started off with really, I knew God, I loved God, I knew I had faith, I knew I was Christian, I knew I grew up in a Christian home, I knew I was going to church here and there. Things started to slow down in my 20s with the church thing, but it wasn't like I didn't have a deep relationship with Him. I just had a knowing that I was a Christian, that I had the Christian faith, and that, okay, you know, I grew up this way, I know Jesus is real, He's in my heart, you know, and that's it. I just kind of left it there, and I kind of still did fleshly things, sinly things, humanly things. You know, I hung out with the wrong people, the wrong crowd sometimes. I did things that were not good. I myself, you know, I talked about my mom having bad relationships that kind of mirrored me. You know, which she eventually found a good guy, but I went through quite a few difficult relationships, rocky relationships myself, and I was looking for love in the wrong places, giving myself to people that never should have had me. I should have had more self-respect, more self-dignity, but that's a story for another day. That's a podcast I'd like to do separately, because I would like to really dive into the nitty-gritty of the backstory I have when it came to love.
Oh, absolutely. We can touch base more on certain topics throughout our entire testimony, like going a little bit more in depth. Definitely do individual episodes that may be shorter than most, but it'll be episodes kind of more dedicated to specific stories and topics and stuff of each of our stories and stuff. But before we do wrap this up, definitely share with us, with everybody, the one experience that I love to hear you tell about when you got the gift of tongues and the angel feathers that you would find when you were really sick, and the video you found, and that whole process. Go ahead and share that with us.
Okay. And so to finish up the last bit of what I was saying was, with the relationships, I went into some pretty deep bad relationships, and not all were bad, some were good, but I hurt people, and I was hurt, and so there was a lot of brokenness in that area, and so that kind of led into just me becoming this person that I'd never wanted to be, and so I was not really in the greatest place with God. I was just working odd-end jobs, and I was living with Mom, and I was trying to make do, and trying to be the best person to my ability, but I wasn't where I needed to be, nowhere even close.
Yeah.
But the breakthrough moment, it was 2019, or 2020, I believe. We had moved out of our townhome, and we moved in with my then stepdad. My mom had met this guy who she was with for 11 years. Unfortunately, they did not last because of reasons, but we moved in with him for just a year, and in that year things changed, and we had to move out of his place, and we moved into this little lady. Her name was Elaine, and she was a good person. She was a good friend. She had her flaws, but it was a hard living situation. But nobody in our family could take us in at the time, me and Mom, and we had no help, and so we kind of just did what we could. And this woman we reached out to this woman who was a old family friend, and she said, hey, y'all can come here. So it was me and Mom and our cats, and we went there, and it was just a little 2-bedroom house in Lyman, and we lived there with her for a couple years, a year and a half, I think it was, I don't remember. And so, like I said, 2020 COVID season, sickness going around all over, all the stuff you was hearing on the news. Very rough time. I remember going to the hospital being sick, but I'd hear people in the rooms near me just horrible, sounded so horrible.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. And so we were in that house. It was, I worked from home at the time, so I was working remotely off my computer. I was a customer service representative at the time for a company called Sitel in Spartanburg, and Mom and Nanny, they would just kind of hang out in the kitchen all day. They'd cook and just talk, and Nanny, she used to smoke cigarettes and drink Pepsi. That's all she ever hardly did. And but she'd always have that TV running in the living room. She had 2 little puppies, and they became me and Mama's world. They were 2 little chihuahuas, and named Izzy and Lulu, and they became our babies. And unfortunately, our cats had to stay in a separate room because they couldn't roam the house, so they had to stay in a separate room for about a year. But we took the best care to our ability for our cats. We gave them everything we could, kept them comforted, gave them, they had a place to sleep, place to do their business, they were fed, all that good stuff. But so what happened was, she had this tiny little in the bedroom me and Mom stayed in. She had this little laundry room, and it was her closet. It was a multi-purpose. It was her closet and laundry room, so it wasn't that big. It was very compacted. She did have some source of it seemed to be black mold, but it could have been not. It could have just been, it was just something that was on her dryer. But I worked from that room at first. Eventually I moved to work from the second bedroom where the cats were. But in the beginning, when I was working for the first so many months, I was in that little laundry area. I had my desk set up, my monitor, everything, and because it was the quietest place in the house, and to be able to take phone calls and help customers. And so unfortunately, I don't know if this contributed to my sickness, but I used to keep the door closed, and I was in there in that compacted little area, and eventually I started leaving the door open, but in the beginning I left it closed. And one day was working on a customer's account, and all of a sudden I started to feel lightheaded, a little dizzy, and I started to lean forward, and I didn't know what was going on, and I started freaking out. And I was like, I asked Mom about it. She said, "You're fine." She said, maybe you need to open that door. Maybe you need some circulation. So I opened the door, started leaving the door open every day. One day I was sitting on the couch in the living room, and I was scrolling Facebook, and I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden, things started to get really weird, really fuzzy. Like I started to see double, like it was on my phone. I was like, "Oh no, what's going on?" I started leaning forward. I knew something wasn't right. My body was giving me signals something's not right. And so I leaned over the couch. I started crying and screaming. I was like, "Mom, I think I'm dying." I'm always over dramatic. So I thought I was dying. I
That's
really
called
did.
a hypochondriac.
Yeah, so I didn't know.
I am that too.
I didn't know what was going on. I was like, "Mom, I think Jesus, he's ready for me." I said, "I think I'm going." She said, "No." She said, "You're fine, just breathe." And it was just, I didn't realize I was having what was called a panic attack. And so the ambulance gets there, two ladies come in, they check my blood pressure, everything. They're like, they were asking these questions, so anyway, I went to I didn't want to go to the hospital that day. They were like, "You want to go to the hospital?" Eventually they calmed me down enough to where I was like, "No, I'm okay." Well, from that point forward, and I had never really had any prior health issues, never been allergic to anything, never had these issues before, never had panic attacks, never had blood pressure issues, none of it. Like, I was always pretty fine, worked my butt off anywhere I worked. I went. I felt as healthy as I could be. Only issues I've ever had was problems standing for too long, or working on my feet too long, being a bigger girl. And so I'd have a lot of pain in my lower back and legs, feet. I had plantar fasciitis for a while in my feet, and that was awful. But, so, anyway, from that point forward, it was like almost every other day at this point. I'd be working, and all of a sudden I'd feel dizzy, and I'd get up and start, like, walking and feel like I was going to pass out. Didn't know what was going on with me. There was one night I was cracking eggs, boiling eggs and cracking eggs in the sink, and all of a sudden they were talking to me, Nanny and Mama behind me in the kitchen, and I almost went down. But I'm such a big girl, I'd always make sure I didn't go down. And so, but I felt like I was going to go down. I felt really lightheaded all of a sudden. My hearing went out that night, and I couldn't hear nothing for a good few minutes. And I looked over at Mama, and I was freaking out, and I was telling Mama, I can't hear you. And Mom was trying to talk to me, and she walked me to the bedroom, and I felt really lightheaded as I was walking to the bedroom. And I sat down, and I was like, she was sitting there still talking, and I just said, "Shh." And I started saying what she told me to say, and my dad told me to say. He was like, "Anytime you feel, weird or something's going on, just call on the name of Jesus. Say, 'Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.'" And so I took that and ran with it, and I always use that. And so in this moment, I was just like, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus, please, please, please." And so all of a sudden, my hearing came back slowly, and then so from that point, it started to get worse and worse. Honestly, there were nights where there was one night specifically, I was sitting at the kitchen table, and Mom was talking to me. And all of a sudden, I just hear dun 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 dun, like it sounded like a train was coming, like a train. What a train sounds like on a railroad track.
Yeah.
And I said, "Mama," I was like, "Stop!" I said, "Do you hear that train?" We didn't know what it was. I was like, "Did you hear that train?" She said, "Yeah." And all of a sudden, we realized it was my heart. It was my heart. My heart was beating that bad, and I think I was out of body or something like that. I didn't realize it was me. And so we both looked at each other, and she started to freak out because my arm started turning blue all of a sudden. My heart was beating so loud and so fast, we didn't know what was going on. And so she grabbed the blood pressure cuff and started trying to take my blood pressure, but it wasn't reading. It wasn't reading. She kept trying to retake it, kept erroring out. It couldn't read because it couldn't keep up with what was going on. And so she was like, "Just stay sit." She called 911. She was like, "Just stay sat down, just stay. I'm a big girl. I ain't going down for nothing." So I was like, "No." I started freaking out. Like, I stood up on my feet. She was like, "No, you need to sit down." Even the ER person on the phone was trying to get me. The responder was like, "You need to sit down." And I was like, "No, ma'am, I'm not sitting down." I was like, "I'm not going to do it." I was like, "I'm staying." And so I would stand up, and I was just, every time stuff like this would happen, I put Jesus in my head, and I would just picture him, and I would just think, "Lord, if this is it, come on, let's just do it. Like, make it quick." I was like, "If this ain't it," I was like, "Keep me here." I was like, "God, please," I just call on his name, and please help me. And so the ER people got there, and they took my blood pressure, it was really elevated, really high, and so they took me to the hospital that night. And from that point, there was like maybe another month, I was probably in and out of the ER about every other night. It was pretty sad. I mean, I got really sick. I got to where I was scared to eat, because anytime I would even eat just a little bit of salt or anything, like my blood pressure I'd have these spikes.
Oh yeah.
And I wouldn't feel good. I'd feel really weird, and I knew, so I got to where I'd eat like just a small salad during the day, or I'd eat like a half a piece of bread or a whole piece of bread at night. Mom would be like, you need to eat something. Like, me and Nanny, we cooked this meal, and I'd be like, nope, I'm good. I'd go in there like a little mouse, just walk in the kitchen, grab my little piece of bread, and I'd nibble on it and walk back in the bedroom. And I was just scared to death to eat. And I got to where I eventually would eat a little more. I'd eat like a bowl of soup or something at night. My favorite was broccoli cheddar. I'd sit there and eat my little broccoli cheddar soup. And I would just lay in bed, and but it was Christmas time, and it was around December, and I never wanted to leave the bedroom. I was so scared. I had to call out I took a break from work. I went on this leave for like, I think 2 or 3 weeks, and to just try to figure out what was going on with me. I needed to try to get into a primary. I didn't have a primary doctor at the time, and so I remember just not wanting to leave the bedroom, staying in depression. I would watch Christmas movies. I'd be so scared to be alone. I'd try to beg Mom to come in the bedroom and not stay in there with Nanny all the time, and called her Nanny Elaine, and she'd come in there and watch a movie with me every once in a while, and I'd have Izzy. Izzy would come and check on me, the little Chihuahua. She'd run from me. She loved Mama. Elaine would be so jealous because her dog would like leave her and always hang out with Mama and sit in Mama's lap, but Izzy would always come check on me. She knew when I was depressed or something was going on in that bedroom, or I'd start crying randomly to myself in the bedroom, and I'd hear them little pitter patter feet, and she'd jump up on the bed and lay on my stomach. She'd get in my face, lick my tears. And then she'd bundle up next to me for a few minutes, then she'd go and jump off bed and go back in there with them. Lulu would come in there and stay with me. Lulu was she was my partner. She'd come up there and lay in between my legs while I watched movies and stayed to myself. But I started to, my dad was like, if you're going to start anywhere, start in the New Testament. So I started to listen to this podcast on Podbean app, and it was by John Stange, Chapter Day Audio Bible, and it was just very comforting. And I just remember starting every night. I'd listen about 2 to 3 chapters or verses or whatever, and I'd let him read it to me on the audiobook, and then he'd say a prayer after that really touched my heart, and a lot of tears, a lot of good nights, feeling comforted by that, but still waking up with issues and vertigo, and just having just dizzy spells. And I remember, but when I finally started giving myself to God and reaching into the Bible finally, like I never really read the Bible. My dad would always call me throughout life, and anytime he'd ever call in to check on me and Jocelyn, he'd, saying, hey, it's me, Dad, checking in on you, what y'all been doing today? And every time he'd go get off the phone, he'd be like, well, I hope y'all have a good night, or bye. Make sure you read your Bible. And we'd always be like, yeah, we know, we are. And I'd always tell him I was, but I never did, for so many years. But finally, I started to listen to a Bible app. I finally started to delve in. And when I started getting close to God, things started changing. And so I'll never forget when I started getting gifts from God. And I didn't realize it was a gift at the time. I just thought something was wrong with my bed sheets. I was like, okay, this goose down cover. I was like, something's wrong. And I was trying to find a hole. One day. I was like, there's got to be feathers coming from this dang on cover. No. And I'll tell you why. So I would get a random feather that would drop from out of nowhere. When I'd be crying, one fell on my face one time when I was crying, and I grabbed it. And I at first I'd just sling them off, and I'd just toss them aside, even though I thought it was sweet. Then I started to save them, and I collected them on a little pull string bag. Well, one night I was in the car, and I was with Mom. We got back from the store, and, was having a Jesus conversation, and one fell on my lap out of nowhere in the car. Like, where did it come from in the car? So that's how I know it wasn't the blanket inside the house. So he was sending me randomly little feathers here and there, little angel feathers, and I looked up the meaning of that, and it was really nice. And so I just basically, it was like you have angel activity going on around you. There's somebody watching over you. There's somebody who's there with you consistently. God knows. He sees you. He sees what you're going through, your pain, your deep depression, your deep anxiety, all the things that I am and was. Yeah. And so So I, you know, that was where that was happening with the feathers. And then one day, you know, I started going back to work. I was nervous to go back to work because I was like, oh, I hope, you know, I feel a little better now. Like I started to get on, not medication just yet. We were still trying to get me into a primary, but I started back work in the other room. I was out in the open. I was in a bigger room and had sunlight, you know, more oxygen, all that in this room. And so I was doing my work and everything was okay for a few days. And I just remember it just kind of started getting bad again. And I was just like, you know what? I felt honestly like I just wasn't going to get better. I remember losing so much weight, and I looked in the mirror one day and I was like, I had went from like 330 pounds to 270. And so I lost like 50 pounds at the time, and I went and I looked in the mirror and I looked just so much smaller than I usually had, and my face was all slimmed, and my skin was like this, almost like this grayish bluish color. Like I looked like a little sick kid, unfortunately. My stools were not normal color, like they were black. It wasn't good. It was a bad time. And so but I'll never forget, I was working one day and I felt at rock bottom. I felt the lowest that I had ever felt in my life. Like, you know what? God is really, truly, I think He's taking me home. I think this is it for me. I mean, I'm not seeing any signs of improvement. I just felt weak and done. And that day I was so rock bottom depressed. And I remember going into aux on my headset, and I just went into break mode. And I wasn't supposed to go into break mode for more than a couple minutes. But I went to break mode for like 20 minutes, y'all. And I was, something told me. I was just sitting there crying, staring off into space, and something said, go to YouTube. And I went on YouTube, and the first video that popped up said, if you need healing, watch this. So I watched the video, and it was a pastor, and he was just speaking on healing. And I was kind of in and out. I heard what he was saying, but it was almost like background noise. But I heard the parts where he said, if you need healing, place your hand on your body where you need healing. And in my head, I was like, you know what? It's worth a shot. And so I put my hand on my knee, and I just started rubbing up and down, going up and down my body, going up and down my body, to my throat, to my head, to my stomach, to my knees, to my feet, everything. And I was just crying, pouring my heart out. And all of a sudden, for the first time ever, something snapped, and I started speaking in tongues. And I had never spoken tongues before this, and I had always wanted to. I'd always seen it growing up. He spoke through me, God, the Holy Spirit, and was intervening to God. And when I tell you it was the most powerful moment of my life, ever-changing moment of my life, it was. I was speaking in tongues for a good, probably up to 10 minutes. It felt like I was looking up at the ceiling, I was looking out in the open. It was just like He was just flowing through me, speaking words of healing over my body, that this was done, that we were done with this. This was a breakthrough, and that from this point forward, we're going to get better. And my mom, I'll never forget, she ran in the room to see what was going on, because they could hear me from the kitchen. And Nanny came in there, they were checking on me, and I looked over at them, and it was still speaking in tongues, and it's like He was calmly talking to them as well. And then after that day, I got in the primary, got medications, got situated, and things started to get better. And things started to get better health-wise. We moved out of her house. We finally got an apartment near my brother in Spartanburg, my brother Justin, and so we just kind of lived here for the last so many years, and this is where I met Josh. There's a little bit more to my story. There's a lot more of my testimony still being written, but yeah, so that from that point forward, from just, getting into the Bible app and reading and listening and getting closer to Him and the healing, that's what made me know. I already always believed in God. Like some people, it makes me sad, because it's like you can look at the sky, look at all His creation, beautiful creation, and know that He's real. But a lot of people, unfortunately, they just can't grasp the concept that Jesus is real. They need some kind of proof. I never really needed proof, but the things that He's done for me in my life, the things that He showed up and showed out in, and I've seen Him and heard Him, heard His voice, heard Him, the things that He's done has just that much more showed me, oh my goodness, this is legit. This is real. There is a heaven, and there is a true, beautiful, divine God who loves me so much and has done tremendous things for me, and he's never left me, never will leave me. He's got me, and he's not going anywhere. And he's brought me out of some serious stuff, and that's not it. What I've told y'all is just the surface. So I'm gonna give it back to Josh.
Testimonies is one of the most amazing gifts that the Lord can give to anybody. It's truly the most biggest blessing that the Lord can do is to give somebody a testimony, and he works with everybody and gives a testimony to everyone. And I truly believe that testimonies is something that you never quite finish. Testimonies are wrote all the way up until the day that you die. And it's all about the things that you do for him, the ways that you plant seeds for people, and the dark times that you come out of, and the positives that you find within it, which the positives always are him. And a lot of people finds it a lot harder to see him through everything. And kind of like you said, the Lord puts so many things in our path, in everybody's path, even atheists and bisexual people
LGBTQ
and all these kind of people that are not following him and that are not in the Bible like they should. There is so many things, proof of evidence all around us every single day that the Lord shows his grace and his mercy to us and shows us how much he cares about us. And I don't see how so many people could just be ignorant to those things and to just continue to shut those things out and not see the positives and the goods. But even those people who doesn't follow him, they have a testimony too. A testimony is the best gift that the Lord can give us. Some testimonies, unfortunately, just does not include, I found the Lord. And some doesn't even include, he found me, because they don't take that into consideration, that even though they are far from him, he still loves them, he still cares about them, and he wants them. He leaves the 99 for the one always. And it doesn't matter how far you are from him, he's always going to come to you and always going to find you at your deepest, darkest moments. And that's kind of why Romans 8 is your favorite. And the connection to Jesus and the blood he has shed for us and the things that he has done for us is the reason why John 3:16 is mine. He gave his son for us to forgive us and over everything that we do. And so many people choose to be blind to these things and not acknowledge the amazing things that the Lord has done, not only for us here on this podcast and in our lives, but for them as well. Some people just continue to believe that, oh, it's just luck, or it's just I was in the right place at the right time, and they don't ever give him credit. And he needs a lot more credit than that. But
our purpose always has to line up with his will, and honestly, he has everybody here for a reason. No one's a mistake. You know, I have a purpose. Clearly, I was actually a baby who was supposed to die at birth because my lungs collapsed, and they had to help, get me back breathing and all that. So I'm here for a reason. He's got a purpose and plan for me, and I'm going to fulfill it. We want to, that's the goal, is just finding your purpose, aligning with him, and, fulfilling his will, and just giving him all the honor, glory, and praise for it.
And most importantly, he brought us both together to be able to share our testimonies and to strengthen us as individuals, as well as to reach out to people who may need it, people who may need to hear this message. And so for that, we say thank you to all the people who has given this podcast first episode a listen. It is most important always that you walk by faith. All you have to have is the faith of a mustard seed, and the Lord can do a miracle. He can do so many things through just that. So before we go today, I would like to pray with all of the people who are listening and watching. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask you please come to us right now. Father God, I thank you so much for the opportunity to share our testimonies with our new friends and those who are listening. I thank you so much for the things that you have brought us through, the darkness that you found us in, the times that you wrapped your arms around us when we needed you most. We thank you so much for those things. And we ask now that you do the same for those who are listening to this podcast. We ask that you reach out to them and you touch them in their darkest moments. Whatever unspoken prayer requests or things they may be going through right now, Father, I ask that you just touch them and heal them from the top of their heads to the bottom of their feet. Anoint their souls and spirits. Put up a hedge of protection around them and their minds. Don't allow the temptation of darkness and other things to come against them, Father. We thank you so much for all that you do for us, and we ask that you continue to be with us throughout the journey that we have here on this podcast and any other place that we go. And I ask that you also do the same for those that are listening, dear Lord. Whatever blessings you have given them, we thank you for those things. Whatever darkness and whatever troubles us and whatever depressions and angries and anxieties and all other things may be there, Father God, I ask that you just take those. We lay these things at your feet, and we lift your name and we praise you always. We thank you for everything. We give you the honor and the glory in everything. In your blessed name, Jesus, thank you. Amen. Thank you all so much for listening to this podcast. We hope that you enjoyed listening to our testimonies. We want you to dive into your Bible as much as you possibly can and come back and visit us here on the channel, as we will do more podcast episodes for you and discuss all kinds of different things. Things that delve into different portions of the Bible, things that we see and know from the TV show The Chosen, and many other topics that we will touch in the near future.
We love all of you.
Absolutely.
And we'll be praying for you always.
We always love each and every one of our followers and friends. Anybody that we meet and greet, no matter who you are, we love each and every one of you. And I always like to say there's nothing you can do about it. So we thank you once again so much for listening. We look forward to speaking once again in the next episode of the podcast. But until then, stay safe, keep in your prayers and in your Bible, and God bless.